and welcome to another Fireside Chat on ABC News and News Radio. I'm John Barron.
And I'm Chazza Chidello.
Could a court ruling stopping some ex-felons from voting swing the state of Florida, or will Mike Bloomberg's many millions swing it right back again?
Biden's also spending up on TV advertising, but it's not enough to sway one prominent never-Trumper. We'll find out why Danny Pletka now wants 4 more years.
There are now 46 days until the US election, and the big question remains, will we see a late game changer that could revive President Trump's prospects? As well as the possibility of a major debate gaffe from Joe Biden or a particularly scathing report from US Attorney John Durham into the FBI's handling of the Russia probe that could reflect badly on Obama and Biden. The most likely disruptive event would probably be the approval of a coronavirus vaccine and a clear pathway out of the health and economic disaster it has wrought. If the disease is cured and this election becomes about who is best to rebuild the economy in America, Donald Trump could suddenly be back on winning turf. Which is why this prediction from the head of the US Centers for Disease Control, Robert Redfield, this week was a major setback for a president who has repeatedly resisted wearing a mask or mandating others to do so.
These actually, we have clear scientific evidence they work, and they are our best defense. I might even go so far as to say that this face mask is more guaranteed to protect me against COVID than when I take a COVID vaccine, because the immunogenicity may be 70%. And if I don't get an immune response, the vaccine's not going to protect me. This face mask will.
And according to Redfield, not only are masks potentially more important than a vaccine, even if a vaccine is approved in the next few months, maybe even before the election, don't expect it to be generally available until the second half of next year.
If you're asking me when is it going to be generally available to the American public, so we can begin to take advantage of vaccine to get back to our regular life, I think we're probably looking at late second quarter, third quarter, 2021.
Pretty clear cut and dried, you would think. Not so, says President Trump.
No, I think he made a mistake when he said that. It's just incorrect information. And I called him, and he didn't tell me that, and I think he got the message, maybe confused, maybe it was stated incorrectly. No, we're ready to go immediately as the vaccine is announced, and it could be announced in October, could be announced a little bit after October. But once we go, we're ready. As you know, Pfizer's making this, they're taking a tremendous financial risk, and they're spending billions of dollars on actually making this vaccine. They're in a stage where they're actually making it, because they feel very confident as to the results. They'll be announcing their results fairly soon. And no, that's incorrect information.
He was pretty clear in the way he said it.
Yeah, well, I think so, but I don't think he means that. I don't think when he said it, I believe he was confused. I'm just telling you, we're ready to go as soon as the vaccine happens.
He didn't seem confused. Dr. Anthony Fauci agrees with Redfield's timeline, not Trump's.
This morning, the nation's top infectious disease expert is at odds with the president and issuing this sobering warning.
If you're talking about getting back to a degree of normality, which resembles where we were prior to COVID, it's going to be well into 2021.
So once again, Chaz, we've got politics versus science, and people are left to decide who they want to believe and why.
Actually, it got even worse because things took an even more yes minister flavour a few hours later when the spokesperson for Robert Redfield put out a statement saying that Redfield thought he was answering a question about the time period in which all Americans would have completed their vaccinations. That was the second or third quarter of 2021, not when the vaccines would be made available to the general public, even though he used the phrase generally available. And then, less than an hour later, the CDC retracted their retraction, saying that the information should not be used. Also, at that same press conference, Trump tried out this COVID excuse.
So we're down in this territory, and that's despite the fact that the blue states had tremendous death rates. If you take the blue states out, we're at a level that I don't think anybody in the world would be at. We're really at a very low level.
Not even close to correct, John. Not only are 5 of the 10 states with the most COVID deaths red states, but the lowest COVID death rate in America of all the states is Alaska, with 60 deaths per million people. That's number 50, okay? Australia has half that, on 33 deaths per million people. Even Germany, which has had a serious COVID battle, has only had 113 deaths per million people. There are 45 states worse than Germany, okay? Even with all that though, those weren't Trump's worst COVID calls for the week, because during Trump's town hall 2 days ago, he persisted with the COVID's just going to go away thing.
And we are going to be okay. We're going to be okay. And it is going away. And it's probably going to go away now a lot faster because of the vaccine. It would go away without the vaccine, George. But it's going to go away a lot faster with it.
It would go away without the vaccine?
Sure. Over a period of time. Sure. With time, it goes
and many
away.
Deaths.
And you'll develop herd, like a herd mentality. It's going to be herd developed, and that's going to happen.
That was not a good clip.
No.
And neither was this one.
They said at the Democrat convention they're going to do a national mandate. They never did it because they've checked out and they didn't do it. And a good question is you ask, like Joe Biden, they said we're going to do a national mandate on masks.
He's called on all governors to have them. It is a state responsibility.
No, but he didn't do it. I mean, he never did it.
Biden, or whoever is running his Twitter account, had some fun with that. To be clear, I am not currently president. Way to make Biden seem relatively sharp.
Yeah.
So where does that leave us?
Well, such an interesting Freudian slip from President Trump when he said a herd mentality will develop.
Yeah.
Because that is certainly developing on Trump's side of the aisle at the moment, this herd mentality that, it's going to go away, and the people are getting used to the fact that, a lot of people are dying, but this is something that they're just factoring into their life now. What's dangerous, though, for Trump is that he is still stuck not just in the it's going to go away kind of groove that he's been stuck in all year, but also the fact that he is ignoring the science on the wearing of masks. And he can't get around the fact that he put a flag in the ground against masks. He's still saying Joe Biden equals shutdowns and a mask mandate. The head of the CDC is basically saying if we mandated masks, we would have this thing under control in 8 to 12 weeks.
Yeah.
That's the science that Joe Biden is saying I would listen to, not because I want to mandate masks, but that's the scientific evidence. So in a week when President Trump was also, clearly denying climate science with the forest fires on the West Coast, for him to be denying the scientific advice of Redfield and Fauci, who are still trying to tread this very, very fine line, at some point you would think that people would say, look, we got a problem here. We've heard this before. And 200,000 people are dead. It just doesn't add up.
Look, I agree about Trump should be listening to the science. There's no doubt about that. But I actually feel like his greatest problem, that's a problem, but I feel like his greatest problem is just the complete incompetence with which he talks about COVID. Whenever he talks about COVID, he's all over the place. He's talking about herd mentality. He's like, he just doesn't make sense. And he contradicts himself constantly, often in the space of one answer, he'll contradict himself. And I feel like that's his problem. People, they don't mind a bit of messing around when they're talking about something that's not serious, but when they're talking about their lives, they don't want to deal with someone who clearly doesn't know what they're talking about. And I feel like every time he opens his mouth about COVID, he undermines himself on the central issue of the election campaign. In
a funny kind of a way, and we saw it in 2015, 2016, and we've seen it during the Trump presidency, by Trump being so erratic, so ideologically sort of an unguided missile, he is often on both sides of a story. He speaks in such loose and general terms that, yes, you can pick him out saying he's for this, but then you can pick out another thing and say, no, he's made it quite clear he is against this. And for a long time, that hasn't mattered. And it's been a bit of a shield from him because, you can't take him literally. Remember, he's also said he's against it as well as being for it. Now, of course, it just looks like he's all over the shop on this particular issue. And unfortunately, right now, there is not a single decision that is made, and the CDC was clearly being pressured this week to contradict their own director, and then suddenly there was some pushback from in there, and the number of whistleblowers that are coming out in the CDC, Department of Homeland Security, Justice Department, the number of people that are saying, we're getting all sorts of inappropriate pressure. That's one of the signs that says we feel as though maybe this Trump crowd are on their way out. They're starting to break ranks. We're starting to hear people in these various government departments saying, we're getting political interference. We're sending up the call's coming from inside the House now. We're sending up a flare saying, this is not right, and we're going to let it be known over the next 7 weeks.
By the way, the reason that the inconsistency that we've just been speaking about is exactly the reason that I feel like in the counterfactual where Woodward had come forward back in February and said, Trump said this to me secretly, here's the tape. I don't think it would have made any difference because, like you say, he's all over the place.
Right.
And I don't see any reason why people would take him any more seriously from what he said secretly to Bob Woodward than what he says all the time. He flips around. And so I feel like the way that people are suggesting that would have changed everything, I just don't think it's right.
Yeah.
But anyway.
But there is still this sense of all it would take to change the narrative here. Well, first of all, the question is, if Trump does, as we widely expect him to do, just go out and declare at some point in late October where we're speeding up approval for this vaccine and people are going to be getting it by the end of the year, frontline workers, people at risk, etc. We don't yet know whether it's going to have a 40% effective rate, 70% effective rate, 2 shots we assume, etc. At that point, will he just be talking up the fact that, we've got Pfizer and these other great American companies churning out vaccines, you're going to have one soon, etc. More of that happy talk, or are we going to have the likes of Fauci and Redfield and others saying, at the current rate, just remember what it was like with the tests when you couldn't get a test? You're not going to be able to get a vaccine. It's going to be many, many months. We couldn't get you a face mask back in February and March. We're not going to be able to get you a vaccine until, probably next summer.
Well, these moments are going to be coming probably after the election. Like the announcement will come probably before the election.
Yeah, before it can be scrutinised too much. It's going to be maybe even a November the 2nd surprise.
Yeah, and then the distribution starts 2 or 3 weeks later. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, we'll have a look at how some of the polls are going, some of the state polls that are tightening a bit at the moment, and some big things that are happening. There is good news and bad news for Democrats coming out of the potentially crucial battleground state of Florida this week. Billionaire businessman and former presidential candidate Michael Bloomberg says he's going to spend $100 million in Florida to support Joe Biden. Bloomberg spent well over $1 billion of his personal fortune on his own ill-fated White House campaign, and after dropping out, he pledged to spend another $1 billion to beat Donald Trump this year. Despite getting a plum speaking slot at the Democrats' convention, DNC members have been really grousing recently that Bloomberg has yet to cough up significant amounts of cash. He did give a check to the DNC to work on help with their data operation and so on. Do you personally think that $100 million in Florida, it's no small amount of money there?
That's quite a fur ball to cough up.
Yeah.
If he delivers. I actually think this could be a big deal, especially if he delivers a bunch of Spanish language ads, which he's saying, because Hispanics are definitely a weak spot for Joe Biden in Florida. I should tell you in particular why I think this donation could be so important. It's according to Ad Age, Trump has committed $38 million to TV ads in Florida, okay, until the election. Biden's committed about $20 million. So that's half as much as Trump has committed, okay? But almost everywhere else, Trump is getting blown out of the water as far as advertising. We've talked about his spending, how he's doesn't have as much money as Biden anymore. These are national TV ads you're looking at now. Until the last week in June, Trump and his allies were dominating TV advertising. But then when his new campaign manager took over, saw the financial hole they were in, campaign cut right back. Look at those dark red bits. They fell right off in August. That's direct Trump campaign spending. Now Biden and his allies are completely dominating the airwaves. They're the two blues. In particular, in Arizona, after August 25, the Trump campaign has run 2 ads. That's 2. In Pennsylvania, from July 30 to September 14, the Trump campaign ran 2 ads.
We're not talking about 2 different ads here.
No.
We're talking about 2 individual ads.
I'm not saying 2 ad campaigns, I'm saying 2 ads.
Got it.
The Trump campaign ran 0 ads in Michigan from July 23 to September 7. Okay, so if Bloomberg starts putting pressure on Trump's advertising in Florida as well, where Trump's going all in with thousands and thousands of ads, then Trump might have to start making some tough decisions about potentially giving up entirely in some swing states. So the Bloomberg donation is important for that reason.
Yeah, and the other thing, of course, it means is that if Bloomberg is booking $100 million in ads in Florida. That frees up the Biden campaign to then put an extra $20 million into Pennsylvania, or another $10 million into Arizona to shore that up. So this is where pots of money, big pots of money, become like pieces on a chessboard, and you can move them around and force the other side to play defence. Because if Biden announces he's putting an extra $20 million into New Hampshire, then at that point Trump thinks, well, either I have to compete or I pull out altogether, as you suggest.
Now, I should say there's three provisos on that. First of which is an incumbent president probably doesn't need to advertise as much because people already know him. And also Trump gets plenty of free airtime as it is. Secondly, Trump is beating Biden on digital spending, $66 million to $46 million. And thirdly, this is the wild card I keep on talking about, but we have no idea what it means. Trump has 280 field officers. And they're all door knocking, they got lots of volunteers, they're all doing their thing. Biden has 0 field officers, 0 door knocking, 0 ground game. Will it make a difference? Will it not? That's the 64.
I still want to see the numbers not on door knocking but door answering, because I'm not convinced that people are answering those doors right now. An update for you now, though, on a story that we have been following for actually a couple of years now. The rights of ex-felons to vote. Florida was one of several states to ban former prisoners from being allowed to ever vote again after their release from jail, under laws dating back to the immediate sort of post-slavery Jim Crow era in the late 19th century that were essentially aimed at reducing the number of blacks who could vote and therefore reducing the political influence that African Americans, former slaves, had. It was in 2018 that Floridians voted overwhelmingly to restore ex-felons their full citizenship rights, including their voting rights. But last year, the Republican governor, Ron DeSantis, a pretty key ally of President Trump, signed into law a bill requiring those ex-felons to repay any debts they have, fines and fees, before they could enrol to vote. The estimated 1.2 million ex-felons in Florida who would have been allowed to register to vote this year, around 774,000 of them would have to repay those debts first. And this week, a federal appeals court judge upheld that requirement. Voting rights advocates say that given racial minorities are a lot more likely to go to jail and to owe fees and fines when they're out of jail, and racial minorities are also a lot more likely to vote for Democrats, this is very, very political. It's not just about rights, and it could have a major impact come November in what is, of course, a crucial swing state. Desmond Meade has been at the forefront of this campaign. He's the executive director of the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition. He's a former Army mechanic who became a drug user. That led him to prison. Since his release, he went through rehab, he graduated law school, and he was one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people last year. Desmond Meade, welcome back to Planet America's Fireside Chat.
Thank you for having me, John.
I wonder, the latest ruling we're hearing about this week, what does that mean specifically for the ex-felons who may have already re-enrolled, registered to vote, but now find they're disqualified again because of outstanding fees and fines? Are they now not able to vote in November? Are they able to vote in November? What's their status?
Well, John, I mean, when you look at the opinion from the 11th Circuit, they did address those individuals that have already been on the roster. And the court said that they cannot be removed unless the state actually finds legitimate proof that they should not be on that roster. And, you know, typically in Florida, it takes, you could only remove someone 30 days prior to an election. And so they would be hard pressed to do so, because I believe that those 30 days have already elapsed. Regardless, we're making sure that parts of the money that we're raising would go towards individuals that's already on the roster. Many of them may owe something as less than $1,500, and we're going to help them pay those things, those legal financial obligations, and so they would not be removed from the roster.
And what are those typically for, those outstanding fees, fines, costs, and so on? What are the bills that ex-felons are left with after they've served their sentence?
What we've seen through our research is that restitution is only present in about 4% of all cases, right? And then you have fines that are present in less than 25% of the cases. And so the overwhelming majority of the people who are owing any kind of legal financial obligations is pretty much tied up in administrative fees, administrative costs. You know, for instance, one of the ones that kind of shocks us is that we have an individual who is too poor to afford an attorney. Therefore, the courts appoint a public defender to represent them. The minute that happens, that person is assessed a public defender fee that they have to repay.
Desmond, you mentioned the fund to help pay for some of these ex-felons' fines and fees. I know that LeBron James, Michael Jordan, Miami Dolphins have also donated large sums to that fund. How much has been donated and how does that compare to how much is owed?
Yeah, Chaz, that's a great question. Let me tell you, while people may look at the 11th Circuit's ruling as a setback, you know, we choose to view it as an opportunity to step up. And that's exactly what we've been seeing happening across the country. In addition to the big high-profile names that you've mentioned, thousands upon thousands of people throughout this country have donated an average of $194, right? And so we've been able to raise over $5 million to help people pay off their fines and fees. And we have already paid out over $4 million of that. And we're looking to get significantly more funding and to pay those out as well. Now, let me tell you that at the end of the day, you're talking about a state, you know, in my lifetime, I haven't seen anyone get into the White House without winning Florida. And my mind goes back to the 2000 election, Bush v. Gore, when that election was actually decided by less than 600 votes, right? And so for every returning citizen that we're registering, let me tell you, I believe that it's an extra person that's being brought into the fold that can really have an impact on the direction that this country is going.
Do you have any idea as to how many of those returning citizens, those ex-felons, are now registered to vote, how that could potentially change the landscape? Are we talking tens of thousands? Are we talking hundreds of thousands? There's maybe a million or more who are eligible.
Yes, over 100,000, over 125,000 returning citizens are on the roster right now. And every single day, we're registering thousands of returning citizens. Out of those who may not have any financial obligations. John, Chaz, you do the math. You know, I don't know which one of you all are best at math. But
Chaz, definitely Chaz. Definitely Chaz.
Looks like one of those math guys. But when you remember that Amendment 4 cleared the pathway to 1.4 million, right? And what we heard during the trial is that there's approximately 774,000 returning citizens that have some type of legal financial obligations. Well, when you subtract 774 from 1.4 million, you have over 500,000 returning citizens that can register right now today and be a part of this election. That's very significant because even after the Bush-Gore election, which was decided by less than 600 votes, every subsequent presidential election in the state of Florida, on average, have been decided by 100,000 votes. And so we have 5 times that amount of returning citizens that are able to register. One of the issues that we face is that a lot of these individuals either don't know that they have a pathway to freedom or are confused and may believe that they have outstanding legal financial obligations when they don't. And that's why the work that we're doing around fines and fees is so important, because as we cast that broad net, we're actually capturing folks who don't owe anything or don't even have an adjudication of guilt and are therefore qualified to register immediately.
Desmond Meade, good to talk to you. Thanks for your time once again.
Thank you so much, John and Chaz. You all have a great evening.
There were 2 new polls out of Florida this week. One from Florida Atlantic University had Trump and Biden tied 50-50. Another from Monmouth had Joe Biden 5 points in front. In the average of polls, Biden is just 1.6% in front of Trump in Florida, with signs that the state's Latino vote in particular is shifting back to the president in a state that he won in 2016 by just over 1% or 113,000 votes. Nationally, some of the polls have tightened a bit this week as well, with President Trump leading Biden by 1, according to Rasmussen. That is only the second major national poll all year to put Donald Trump in front. The last time was way back in February when, of course, Joe Biden was looking like he was crashing out of the primaries after coming in 5th in New Hampshire. We should also note that Rasmussen tends to favour Republicans by an average of about 1.5 points. And any single poll can, of course, be a statistical outlier, which is why we focus on the average of polls, which, thanks to Rasmussen being worked in there, has narrowed this week to just under 6 points.
Yeah, look, we tried to focus on a different demographic each week as well on Friday, and this week I want to focus on what might be the key demographic of white women without college degrees. Now, white people without college degrees notoriously delivered the White House to Trump back in 2016. But if we look at Washington Post's latest poll, Trump has gone from 62 to 34 amongst white people without college degrees in 2016 to today, he's 54 to 44, which is a big enough turnaround to lose an election. But look at white men without college degrees. In 2016, Trump was leading them 69 to 26. In 2020, he's about the same at 65 to 32. But look at white women without college degrees. From 56 to 40, he was leading in 2016, to in 2020, Trump is behind 45 to 52. That could be the election right there. Having said that, the New York Times' Upshot has an interesting feature where they adjust the current polling averages, John, to the extent that the state polls were wrong in 2016. And if the state polls have exactly the same error as in 2016, this week, Biden wins Arizona, he wins Michigan, but he loses Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, and Trump remains president. But before Trump supporters get too excited, they were measuring the 2016 error from 3 weeks out. And you will recall the polls closed up a fair bit after that.
Yep.
By the way, every now and then, we should just consider what this election would have been like without COVID. The reason I say that is because we saw a real sliding doors moment this week from the Census Bureau. They released income growth figures from 2019, and US median household income in 2019 jumped from $64,000 to $68,000. That is an increase of 6.8% for 1 year in median household income. That's the largest growth rate in income since at least 1967 when they started measuring this stuff, 10 times the average rate over that period. If that was still happening, John, it would be a very different election.
Yeah, things were great before they were terrible, weren't they? Bob Woodward's recent book on the Trump administration contained more damning comments from former top administration officials, including retired Defence Secretary James Mattis, who described President Trump as, quote, dangerous and unfit. That echoed the likes of former Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, who didn't deny calling Trump a moron, and National Security Advisor John Bolton, who is also out there saying that Trump is not fit for office and doesn't have the competence to be president. So it's a bit surprising to see another prominent member of the neoconservative national security establishment seem to go very much the other way, from being against President Trump to now be seeming to advocate for his re-election. Australian-born Danielle Pletka is a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. She published an op-ed in the Washington Post this week that raised plenty of eyebrows, declaring, "I never considered voting for Trump in 2016. I may be forced to vote for him this year." She says she fears Trump's erratic, personality-driven decision-making. She says his contempt for NATO is alarming, as is his delusion that he can manage rogue leaders. But what she fears even more is that, quote, Joe Biden would be a figurehead president incapable of focus or leadership who would run a teleprompter presidency with the words drafted by his party's hard left ideologues. In 2016, Pletka described herself as both never Trump and never Hillary, but also as a foreign policy voter, which makes her criticism, particularly of the Democrats' domestic agenda here, particularly interesting. Danielle Pletka is with us from DC. Welcome back to the program, Danielle.
Thanks for having me.
I wonder, your op-ed this week, it's caused quite a stir in Washington, D.C. and among the chattering classes. I wonder, though, it came out at the same time as the president inked the deal between Israel, Bahrain and the UAE. Is that the gist of this? Those sort of foreign policy achievements are why you now support him?
No, not at all. And I didn't say I supported him. I just said I thought I might be edged into supporting him because I'm worried about where the Democratic Party is. I do think that the deal that was signed this week, which really is a landmark between Israel and the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, is a yet more evidence that there is nothing that Donald Trump can do that will be viewed as decent, acceptable, or good by sort of half of the glitterati of Washington.
So just explain that for us. So you're saying that you may feel as though you may be forced to vote for Trump, whereas you said never Trump last time and you said never Hillary last time as well. I'm a little confused. Where is your head at, Danielle Pletka?
You know, that's a really fantastic question. You know, I wish I could. Well, I mean, this has been one of those years in which you ask yourself that every 5 minutes. Where is my head? You know, between COVID and everything else, it's really hard to say. Look, I was not never Trump last time. I didn't vote for him. I didn't vote for Mrs. Clinton. And I really had no intention of voting for Donald Trump. I'm appalled, like most normal people are, by his Twitter account, by how he manages, by the things he says, by what drives him in both domestic and in foreign policy. On the other hand, you know, we don't have an election that is just a referendum on Donald Trump here in America. We have an election between two people. And I would sort of go further, and this is what I said in my article, I would go further and say not just simply between two people, but two parties. And what troubled me, and I tried to write a little bit thoughtfully about it, was that the Democratic Party no longer represents the center-left, which Mr. Biden used to represent many years ago. It now represents what I see as the far left, and that's rather more difficult.
Danielle, you wrote about how far the left have gone specifically in the last year. But if you look at the 2020 primary results, Sanders and Warren combined were 34% of the vote. In 2016, Sanders was 43% of the vote. Hillary had a one-on-one race against Sanders and she won 55% of the vote. Biden ran against 1 million people and he won 51% of the vote. So why is it worse this year than 2016?
You know, look, that is unfortunately a testament to how unpopular Mrs. Clinton was. It's really not a statement about 2020. And again, you know, sometimes when you articulate something that is your personal view of the political outlook, it doesn't go further than to say that I'm not a pollster, I'm a voter. And look, you know, I've known Joe Biden since 1992. The reality is that while Bernie Sanders did well and better then, he did better then because he represented the alternative to a candidate that just nobody liked. Okay? Now, he represents much more of the mainstream of the party. But the primaries aren't the be-all and end-all in any case.
Danielle, presumably the Democrats are going to be in power eventually. So would you prefer to wait until there's a stronger, less moderate Democrat who's president, rather than a potentially weaker, more moderate Democrat to be president in the form of Joe Biden?
You know, look, what I care about is what's good for the country. What I care about is America staying on a path of prosperity, staying on a path that delivers opportunity and employment and a better life for more people. That's the path we've been on for more than 50 years. And I worry that where the Democratic Party wants to take us, you know, sort of in a European direction where, you know, we have a universal income, so people don't really have to work and we can start to get used to 12% unemployment. You know, what you're saying to me, I guess, is, you know, well, you know, Danny, you know, you might as well live with it because you're eventually going to live with it. So, you know, close your eyes and think of England. And my answer to that is no, thank you.
So I don't envy your position in this, Danny, because on the one hand, you fear this sort of, you know, enfeebled Trojan horse for a bunch of socialists in Joe Biden. But you know that it's remarkable that you know, Donald Trump has been described as not fit or competent to be president by John Bolton, your former colleague, Mattis, Tillerson, describing this man as a moron. I mean, these are unprecedented critiques of somebody's basic ability to do the job. This isn't a matter of words over deeds. This is over whether they're just up to the task.
Yeah, look, I ask myself, and I know many Americans ask themselves, what it is that we have done to bring onto ourselves two absolutely dreadful candidates. One who has taken the Republican Party in a direction that very, very few Republicans, feel is overall right, and the other who, as you said, if I may quote you, is rather enfeebled and is sort of the last hope of defeating him. This is a pretty bloody sorry pass for us. And at a certain moment, I hope we're going to be able to take a good, hard look at ourselves and say, really, perhaps we deserve better. Perhaps we can choose better.
Finally, Danielle, this is probably a bit cheeky, but given the topic of the op-ed...
No, you?
Me? I know. I should ask, have you ever actually voted for a Democratic candidate for president before?
Well, I was an Australian citizen for a long time, and so I've only voted in a few elections. And yes, I have voted for a Democrat, and I've also not voted for Republicans. So plenty of times. What guides me almost always are my principles. I don't like to be in a position where I have to think about voting for somebody in order to stop somebody else. I don't like having to compromise the things that I believe in to support what is better over something that is worse, or worse yet, something horrible that is better than something execrable. I don't want to be in that position. I don't want to, but that is the position we are in, and it's not very pleasant, but it's also the right thing to try to have an honest conversation about. And the fact that I tried to have an honest conversation about it and got the bloody crap kicked out of me by people who thought that it was just inappropriate to even consider tells you a lot about the state of our political debate today.
Well, Danielle Petka, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, no, thanks for the great questions.
Now, Danielle worried quite a lot there that Biden might be a puppet. And the so-called teleprompter presidency is a fear that the Trump campaign has certainly tried to stoke over the last few months. They've pointed to supposed conversations like this where Biden is clearly using a teleprompter.
One of the things that that I think is really important is that we somehow put that back on. There's somehow that we're in a situation where we...
Put that back on. Very subtle. Biden seemed to even be using a teleprompter when talking to the extremely not hard-hitting James Corden.
There's so many incredible pictures, including one here that may be too heavy to lift up. But this is one of my favorite pictures. It's a picture of me and my two boys when they were in college.
Oh.
I don't know whether you can see that.
Just move it, move it. Oh, look at that.
And I have that hanging in my bedroom.
And a close-up for those who missed it. Look at the reflection. You can see the teleprompter in the reflection right there. And this is where it starts getting really dodgy, John. Biden seems to be using a teleprompter while supposedly answering people's questions during a Q&A.
And I would like to know, what will your administration do to help them give them that chance? Thank you.
Move it up here. There used to be a basic bargain in this country.
Move it up here. Subtle again. The Trump campaign have overreached here, though, in this occasion. They've used a number of times this moment from a Biden speech, which you would expect him to use a teleprompter for a speech, and they pretended this was during a conversation, which it wasn't.
And in addition to that, we have to make sure that we are in a position that...
I gotta say, that is quite funny, though. We've all been there, John, you and I.
Sure.
but the whole issue got some momentum when Biden's bumbling press secretary, TJ Ducklow, was asked about it on air.
Has Joe Biden ever used a teleprompter during local interviews or to answer Q&A with supporters?
Brett, we are not going to engage. This is straight from the Trump campaign's talking
they're
points.
using it.
And what it does, Brett, is it's trying to distract the American people.
They're using it. They talk about it every day. Can you say yes or no?
That's because they talk about it every day, Brett, because they don't have a coherent
Well, you have
strategy.
an answer. Yes or no?
Brett, they talk about it every day because they don't have a coherent argument for why Donald Trump deserves re-election.
I understand, but you can't answer the question.
Brett, I am not going to allow the Trump campaign to funnel their questions through Fox News and get me to respond to that.
Not very convincing, John, but does it matter?
Well, we'll find out when the debates are on, where there won't be teleprompters, but we could see, as we did in 2004, back then Democrats were saying George W. Bush has got somebody giving him answers into his earpiece. Look at that bulge in the back of his jacket. Remember jacket bulgegate? So, look, I suspect that Biden will probably make this into an irrelevant argument. But, look, early on, he was being criticised for having written notes and looking down at his written notes when he was doing these interviews. Now, you know, he's a senator who always, 36 years in the Senate, he would stand up and he would have notes and he would be, speechifying, but with bullet points in front of him. We've seen the bullet points that he had written down about, he's going to be asked about Kamala Harris before he made his VP selection. He sort of said, no hard feelings about Kamala Harris, etc. So look, whether you want to just say that that's how a professional politician retains message discipline, and Joe Biden has had to learn message discipline because he is gaffe prone, because he has gotten into trouble by just speaking, off the cuff. But obviously in the context of a 77-year-old running for president, being wedded to a teleprompter or written notes, people are going to say, he's losing it. He's losing it. So look, how does this narrative play out? I don't know that, Danielle Pletka is clearly concerned that this guy's losing his marbles. But I'm old enough to remember when they were saying that Barack Obama is wedded to a teleprompter. He's not a great speaker after all. He can't talk without a teleprompter in front of him. He's an empty vessel that everyone's put all their hopes and dreams into. I mean, it's kind of the same thing in a way, but I'm not sure that anyone who hates Trump enough to think that it's a good idea to elect a 77-year-old guy at the third attempt for president, they're not going to go, yeah, and Joe's lost a step, so I guess we better go back to Trump. I don't think it's going to change minds. What do you think?
I think you identified the key moment, which is the debate. I think, personally, I don't see actually. I think it makes sense for him to use a teleprompter if he has the facility to do so. This is the upside of the COVID election. He's often talking to a camera. And so if I had the option of using a teleprompter, which I might ignore or might pay attention to, I would. I do. Every single week, I choose the teleprompter.
Is that what that is?
Yes. So I understand him using a teleprompter if he has the option of doing so, but he needs to show, given this is the attack from Donald Trump, that he's lost his marbles. He needs to show that he doesn't rely on it, and the debate is that moment. You asked before about, is the debate the game-changing moment potentially? I think this is part of the reason why it is potentially, because Donald Trump has lumped so much of his attack on Joe Biden on something that can be disproven during a debate.
Because in typical Trump fashion, he has overreached. He has gone beyond the possibility that Biden is using as a memory jogger when he's doing, virtual town halls, or remember the name of the interviewer, or what's this question about, or what are the talking points to not make news, which is what a lot of these interviews are about, not making news, sticking to the narrative. But when the president is saying, and you journalists should all be ashamed because you're giving your questions to Biden in advance and he's reading them off, and they're scripting their answers in advance, to actually say that there is a conspiracy between the White House press corps or the people following Biden's campaign and the Biden campaign, that's in the realm of the ridiculous, which is probably going to come back and bite Trump, unless, of course, Joe Biden does have a senior moment and he's standing drooling behind the lectern, and then suddenly, Trump's looking like a good option again.
I remember we were talking about this when the North Korea meeting first came up between Trump and Kim Jong-un, when Trump was abusing Kim Jong-un, trying to drive him to some kind of meeting of some kind. I remember saying at the time that Trump is the 1% candidate. He's happy to go for that 1% chance of gold and risk 99% chance of failure because he likes going for the risks and swinging for the rafters. And this is one of those moments where, you know, there's a very, not 1%, but there's a 10% or 15% chance that Joe Biden screws up the debate. He's willing to go for that chance, but if it doesn't come off, then he's stuffed.
Yep.
So let's see.
Yeah, that's that entrepreneurial spirit that made him make $10 billion and go bankrupt 6 times. It's been a rich journey for him and all of us. But that is all the time we have for another Fireside Chat. Planet America back next Wednesday night at ABC TV on 9:30 p.m. See how nicely I read that off the teleprompter?
Yes, and I'll read this off. The Pet Podcast is also back. That is where you'll find it there.
Good night.
See you later.